Hello, everyone, and welcome to this new podcast of cross-cultural management. Today, we're going to talk about expatriation tips. My name is Jerome Dumetz, and I'll be glad to share with you some very practical elements about life abroad, whether you're a student or a manager or moving abroad for any other reason. When you are going to move to another country, the excitement is often the main emotion that will be present, but in reality, it doesn't exactly work this way because quickly our mind, our body is immediately bombarded with a lot of signs, a lot of cues that are extremely different from your common and daily life. And this is a shock, actually, that we don't always realize will affect you mentally and physically. So there are lots of things that you need to take into account, the climate, the time difference, being far away from your loved ones, the food that you're eating, the habits people have around. Everything is different. So at one point, some level of anxiety, of confusion will arise, especially when you don't understand the language very well, for instance. And this might lead to depression and even some very bad reaction of anger, for instance. This is what we call the cultural shock. The bad news is that no one escapes it. Even after many, many years abroad, anyone will have at one point a feeling of not being at the right place, not feeling good. Myself, after many, many years abroad, I regularly have some culture shock coming. The good news is that there are ways to actually reduce the amplitude and the devastation of this cultural shock and to learn to live with it. So how does it look? Well, usually we present cultural shock as a curve which is representing how you feel. Usually the time abroad in our mind starts before the departure. When you know you are going abroad, you go on Erasmus, or you are going on an internship, or you go for any other reason abroad to work, and you're very excited because finally you got the green light. So this period is a period of euphoria where you feel great, you got lots of plans, you imagine everything you will be able to do when you move to a new place. And then comes the moment when indeed you are going abroad. And in most of the cases, things get even better. Arrival is usually well managed. You got people welcoming you, especially if it's a business expatriation. You are being showed around. You've got people assisting you, helping you, and you live a dream. You are like a tourist, but on top of that, you become local. You've got this feeling that you can see of both sides of the mirror. This is an extraordinary moment. You are beyond just tourism. You are now experiencing the culture for real. This is great, but sooner or later, things start to get a little bit uneasy. All the colleagues and friends who helped you at the beginning, well, they are busy. You start having more and more things to do, studies or work. You start feeling a little bit homesick. Maybe you're missing your friends, your family. Maybe the food makes you a little bit uneasy physically, for instance. And maybe you fall sick. You got the climate that will change and so on. Anyway, in one word, sooner or later, you start having a feeling of burden on your shoulder. And one day, everything crashes. You feel bad, you hate everything that belongs to that culture, you hate all the citizens of that country, you hate all the habits, all the traditions, all the food, all the historical characteristics, everything. You are experiencing your cultural shock. Welcome. Now, there isn't much to do when this hits. You need to, first of all, acknowledge it. All right, I'm experiencing a cultural shock. This is not a deadly thing. You just need to accept that things are a little bit different. You also need to accept that, well, maybe you were not entirely honest with yourself at the beginning because you knew that things were not perfect, but you wanted to ignore it. Now you get the both side of the coin, the greatness, the beginning, everything was perfect, and, well, the not so great things about a different culture. What comes next? Acculturation. Acculturation is a process of learning and developing your cultural competence to acquire knowledge about the culture. This is when you need to seriously think about learning the local language. This is when you need to get to know all the historical elements, learn about the folk traditions, mingle with people and so on. The objective is to reach a point of acceptance. You're never going to be as happy as the beginning. I mean, there's only one first love, but you can feel good in your new culture. Sometimes, unfortunately, this doesn't work very well. There might be some rare case of rejections. This happens when, first of all, you didn't want to move abroad. This is particularly true with family members. Or when something absolutely unexpected happened, for instance, just before the departure. You have a significant other just before departing, and therefore as soon as you arrive abroad you feel homesick. But this is extremely rare. However, let's be fair, not everybody is made to live everywhere. This is why it's a good idea to investigate the cultural differences before you live. This is a very simplistic review of the cultural shock. Of course, it comes back regularly and the amplitude will change over time. The emotions that are involved in a cultural shock are various, going from anxiety, where you feel very stressed, you feel very angry because of disconfirmed expectations, you feel you've been lied upon. You develop at one point a feeling of belonging, where you want to meet with people that are similar to you, maybe some fellow citizens. And of course, you have this awkward feeling of ambiguity when you don't know if people are being nice with you because they pity you, or if they are laughing when you arrive, if they make fun of you or they laugh with you. This is all part of the cultural shock, and this is important, of course, to recognize those characteristics, among others, when you've got colleagues and friends who display those emotions, that you can help them not to lock themselves up, because, of course, the worst is to not meet anybody and to be afraid of the other culture. In that case, you will waste this opportunity abroad and you will associate this expatriation in a very negative way. So what can you do? There are different things you can do. First of all, you need to become some kind of a detective. You need to gather information before the trip, while you arrive. Ask around, check information, read. That's very important. You need to become an expert. Try also to look at the big picture. Try to be an observer of the other culture. And also use this opportunity to recognize your own cultural baggage. And this is, by the way, where part of the shock comes from, where you actually realize maybe you're more conservative than you think, or you're more liberal than you think, maybe you are not as open-minded as you think, and so on and so on. This is very important to know where you stand if you want to understand how you can adapt to other cultures. You need to pay attention to different values, be very respectful of the what people think, how people do things. Don't be judgmental, observe, and try to understand why people are doing that. It's also a good idea to find a host national friend, somebody not necessarily your age, that can actually be the one person you contact when you've got questions. You heard a joke, you didn't understand what's funny. When you come later and say, oh, sorry, I heard this joke, everybody was laughing. What is so funny? And then by having some sort of reverse engineering, you start understanding the cultural elements that you missed. And usually people are very happy to explain you all the cultural characteristics of their country, because foreigners usually ask questions that locals don't think about. And so it is always a pleasure to be this national friend. So don't hesitate to ask permission to ask all kinds of questions. You can also get involved out there. Don't stay alone. Don't stay in your room. participate to all kind of organizations, students associations, not students associations, things that are with other fellow foreigners, but also with locals, the best way to meet people. Adjust your lifestyle where you have to not exactly live like at home. Maybe your breakfast is going to change, maybe your timetable is going to change because you need to adapt to the local culture. You need to stay healthy, make some sports, be careful not to fall into depression and other problems like such as alcoholism and drug addiction, which is very common among expatriates who don't manage their cultural shock. In case of trouble, ask for help, either inside the organization that organize your expatriation, because there are always people ready to help, or through medical help. There are some specialists that are used to help people who feel not at their right place, especially among foreigners. This is perfectly normal to ask for help. And finally, get a sense of adventure. You'll see the world is very interesting. People are kind. It's might be also a good idea to switch off a little bit all your a source of information and get the data from the source and ask around if you've got questions. You will be surprised how people are so interested in sharing with you their culture, and like that you will understand, and in return you will also share your culture. This is all for this podcast. I hope those tips will be useful to you, whether you came from abroad or you're going abroad, or at least, for instance, to help some friends and colleagues that are in this situation. Thank you and goodbye. See you in another podcast.